Attention, are you ready to be blown away? You asked for it, and they listened. My friends at Manscaped just relaunched the Ultra Smooth Package. This specialized groin shaving kit is here to help you buff, protect, and shave your most sensitive areas. It's time to trim that bush and get to the roots with a discount just for you from Manscaped. Get 20% off plus free shipping at manscaped.com with the code BATBOOK. Now, riddle me this. What is in the Ultra Smooth Package? Answer: the crop exfoliator, crop gel, and the crop shaver. Out with the terrible trio. This terrific trio will get you trimmed from front to back. The crop exfoliator is loaded with the right ingredients to help reduce ingrown hairs in your delicate places. Matt Hagen would trust it. Crop gel helps you see where you're shaving and feels like a spa treatment. But don't worry, not of the eternal youth kind. And the crop shaver is designed to shave the underside of your little Gotham with confidence. It's a smaller, thicker blade with a micro comb bar that allows for the best shave possible from any angle. Slade Wilson is even a fan. So smooth out your fellas with the relaunched Ultra Smooth Package from manscaped.com and get 20% off plus free shipping with the code BATBOOK. That's BATBOOK, BATBOOK.
All it takes is one bad day.
You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This is not my home. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon.
Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. Now, I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network. There's a whole list of other Bat-related shows that also dive into other nerdy subjects we all love to frolic about in our free time. The Batman Book Club is also on Patreon. If you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support it, just go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc, and it helps keep those generators running in the way manner study. Now, thank you for listening to episode number 104, Interlude on Earth 2. Now, joining me for this discussion is a very special guest. He's a comic book writer. He is an expert in all things animation, and he's a citizen on Cybertron with the Netflix series, The Transformers, The War for Cybertron. It is FJ DeSanto. FJ, thank you for coming on to the Batman Book Club.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for not having Bill Ramey on this. So we can actually talk and not be dominated by Grandpa Bill.
He'll listen to this because he's excited to listen. I know, to this,
that's
and
the whole
he will
point.
love.
He will
love to hear that. I can hear him. I can hear him laugh now. So there you go. Any more shots you want to take at Bill? Have at it. You don't have to wait for me, but
if the opportunity presents itself, I always take a shot at Bill.
I'm very excited. I'm very pleased to have you on here. To bring your expertise on Batman comics here. Before we dive into the book that we're going to talk about, though, I always like to ask somebody the first time on, what's your favorite Batman story?
This is it. The one we're talking.
This is it.
I mean, yeah. For some reason, well, Dark Knight Returns, obviously, and I got to work with Frank Miller. I produced a movie for him, and I had lunch with him a couple of months ago, and he remembered a fight we had 15 years ago where I was really upset with his portrayal of Dick Grayson in Dark Knight 2. And it's still a grudge we have against one another. But I mean, I'm of a certain age, and we'll get into this, where comics and I grew up alongside one another. It just happened to be, the advantage of being a middle-aged man now is I was the right age for Dark Knight, Watchmen, V for Vendetta, things like that. When comics grew up, it was just happened to be like right on the same parallel path. But this book that we're going to talk about, there's a weird thing I have about Earth 2 Robin since I was a wee little kid. And this book to me is sort of like the definitive story of that character, or like the best version of that character. So it's easily I shouldn't say it's maybe my favorite, maybe Dark Knight Returns, the first one, is my all-time favorite, but this is I think this is my all-time favorite single issue of a comic book. I've probably bought like 3 or 4 copies of it over the years.
It really does thrill me when I have somebody on and they get to talk about their favorite story. It's gotten to happen a few times, and that just makes, I mean, it's the whole kind of the reason for the show as itself is to talk about Batman comics. And then when you pull a deep pull like, you know, like this, because of course everybody knows of Dark Knight Returns, like you just said, Long Halloween, Year One, and everything. But when you pull a specific issue, just one series, it's not part of a whole series or a whole run, that makes it really fun. So let's just get ready to dive into The Brave and the Bold, number 182, Interlude on Earth 2. Now it has a cover date of January in 1982. It's written by Alan Brenner, illustrated by Jim Aparo. It was released obviously physically. It's been collected in quite a random amount of collections, like the Tales of the Batman, Alan Brenner, Legends of the Dark Knight, Jim Aparo, Volume 3, the somewhat recently released Batman, the Brave and the Bold Omnibus, Volume 3. Surprisingly, it's not on DC Universe Infinite.
I know.
It's not on Comixology either. So it's really surprising to me. So you've kind of already shared that you have physical issues of this, and is that what you read in prep for this?
Yeah, I did, and I forgot how good it was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be honest with you, and like I said, I had this. What I really like about it is what Alan Brennan did with this is he sort of gave some cool elements to the Earth 2 Bat universe that you really didn't get. So at that point, it was very much like, hey, we know, and this is mostly because of Paul Levitz and Joe Staton in particular, is, hey, Batman married Catwoman, they had a daughter, she becomes the Huntress, right? And subsequently, they kill off Earth 2 Batman in Adventure Comics a few years before this, when he's Commissioner Wayne and he becomes Batman one last time and all this stuff. And, and that was sort of it. And then it was sort of, Huntress sort of goes off and does her thing with Power Girl, and Robin, Dick Grayson, who now at this point is an adult, he's like an ambassador to South Africa, which was something Levitz came up with in All-Star Squadron in the 70s and all that stuff. Like weird stuff like that. But what was cool about this one is it actually gave some depth to Earth 2 Robin, but then also gave some depth to Earth 2 Batwoman, which sort of never existed, like basically the continuing of the Golden Age version of her. And it's just a really interesting, simple premise of what happens when an adult Dick Grayson, who's been dealing with the death of their version of Bruce Wayne, has to team up with another Bruce Wayne. And there's resentment towards him and stuff like that. And it's really about them finding a common ground and a partnership, all thanks to, of course, to Hugo Strange, who's always a great villain. But, I grew up obsessed with Earth 2. I loved Earth 2 as a kid. And I'm sure, I've been on Bill's stuff before, but I'm a Dick Grayson fanatic since childhood. And again, you talk about that specific age. The year this comes out is the 1982, I think is the same year or around the same time New Teen Titans comes out, which was a complete like brain explosion for me, and is probably my other favorite. Teen Titans are my favorite group. Dick Grayson is my favorite character of all time. And I had bought a lot of Teen Titans, pre-New Teen Titans as a kid, like an old comic stuff and, the 60s stuff and all that stuff. And it was never really good, but I was always obsessed with the joy of the sidekicks getting together. And I think I liked Dick Grayson because he was in this cool world, but I wasn't as sort of dark and angry as Batman. So Robin was always much more fun for me. And I loved the Earth 2 concept. I loved Justice Society. I loved All-Star Squadron and things like that. And then the real obsession with Earth 2 Robin starts, at least from my memory, which is, I think it's in 1978, and I'm really young, like I'm 4 or 5 years old at this point. Batman 300. If you remember Batman 300, which is this bizarre, it's not very good, right? It's I think Walt Simonson drew it. And it was called The Last Batman Story. And someone named David Reed wrote it. I think Walt Simonson and Dick Giordano drew it. But it's a cover of Batman holding, his cowl and cape, while Alfred and Robin stand in the background. And Robin, this was the first time I'd seen the Earth 2 Robin character. And he was in this really badass costume that at the time I didn't know Neil Adams had designed in Justice League a few years before. I sort of ended up backtracking that as I got older, finding all the back issues and stuff like that. But I just loved the costume, and I sort of loved knowing like this is what happens to my favorite characters as an adult. And that story, by the way, isn't very good, that Batman 300 story. And it's sort of been lost to time, but Simonson's art is great. But the story is meandering, like esoteric nonsense, at least based on my memory. But so it led to my sort of, whenever Earth 2 Robin would briefly show up, especially they had that run in Adventure Comics where they were like the dollar comics, and it was Aquaman, Flash, like all the, multiple stories in one. And that led to the death of Batman. So there was a lot of Earth 2 Robin in it. And I love Joe Staton. I just think is a tremendous artist. Sorry, I'm getting to this whole issue. So by the time you get to this Brave and the Bold issue, there's been there's only been a dearth of Earth 2 Robin. They tried to launch him in the All-Star Squadron with Power Girl and Star Spangled Kid in the 70s with Wally Wood and Dick Giordano. But then the character just sort of always disappears. And, I even asked Levitz at some point, why did it sort of taper off? And he was just sort of like, there wasn't much to the character. Like there wasn't, it was like, who is Robin at that age, right? He's not Batman. He's not, and this is before they even killed Earth 2 Batman. So that's what makes this book even more special, is you sort of have a dynamic that you've never seen before and sort of never see again. That's sort of, it's like a one-off of our Earth 1 Batman sort of entering this Earth 2 world, which was always, up until this point, the fun team-ups. It was the fun yearly JLA, JSA team-ups. So you never really had any sort of angst or conflict between the characters, etc. And then you sort of have this story of Dick Grayson dealing with the trauma of having to interact with a Bruce Wayne that he doesn't really know, but also this Batman sort of dealing with this familiar yet completely foreign thing, which again, in those stories, they never really addressed in those Earth 1, Earth 2 crossovers, which were always fun, sort of like, Barry Allen meets Jay Garrick and they have a barbecue, everybody always got along. And that's why I was sort of fascinated. And subsequently, it's Aparo at the top of his game, right? Like he's just this whole particular era of Brave and the Bold, and he goes on for like another 20 issues to like Brave and the Bold 200, is just a man at the top of his game. He's so good. So he captures the emotions in particular of both Dick, Earth 2 Dick, and Batwoman, which is really fascinating. She's sort of like, she's like, I loved Batman, and he sorry, excuse my language, he retired, and I just couldn't be Batwoman anymore. And and then you got to remember, in Earth 1, Batwoman's dead. So for Bruce, he's got to deal with, he's also seeing a ghost, right? And she's sort of falling in love with him again and stuff like that. And there's just, all this fun stuff sort of just squashed in there. But it gave some depth to Dick Grayson of who he was at that point. And, and no one's done it since. And no one did it before that. Even when they first introduced that costume in the old Justice League issues, it's sort of Earth 2, it's actually Earth 1 Robin wearing that costume, because they were desperately trying in the 60s and 70s to get Earth 1 Dick into a different costume. So there were always like these costume contests. If you Google it, you'll see like in the 70s, they would do like fan submitted designs and all this crazy stuff. And Neil Adams designed that costume. And so originally Earth 1 Robin, I forget what issue JLA it is. I was just rereading it too. His regular costume, the one we know with the shorts and all that stuff, gets ripped. And Earth 2 Robin is still in that Batman inspired costume, which I hate. I hate that costume. You know, it's the Batman costume with a yellow cape and a thing in the middle, right? It's the worst. And he literally sort of brings Earth One Dick to, I think, the Batcave, I don't remember, or some headquarters, and is like, you need a new costume. Here's this thing this guy I know, Neil Adams, created. They literally reference Neil Adams in the comic. It's so awesome, right? And subsequently they go on the rest of the journey, and Earth One Dick is wearing this new costume, and it never comes back. It's never addressed again and all that stuff. Someone somewhere must have said, like, no, we're not doing that new costume. And then subsequently, I don't remember where it's sort of, I don't know if it's in that Batman 300 where it's suddenly he's in that costume, but again, All-Star Squadron might have done that. You know, like where it's like, okay, now Earth 2 Dick Grayson's wearing that particular costume. But the way Aparo draws him, you know, like Dick Grayson's a man, and he's at the top of his game in terms of being a crime fighter and stuff like that, and in that version of Gotham. Whereas I always felt like other artists drew him, you know, too skinny or too young, etc. This felt like an adult. Like it feels like he and Earth One Batman are the same age and they're peers, and it's a really fascinating dynamic that, like I said, it only seems to have, unless somebody can point out someplace else, you know, like, you know, for me, it's the pinnacle of the Earth One, Earth Two concept, in that they brought a maturity to it that hadn't existed before. Sorry, I rambled on.
It's okay. That was something I was going to get into, was about the suit. I had no idea that you were such a Dick Grayson fan. And then, so, I mean, it would totally make sense on why, when asked what book would you like to talk about, this is the one, because this is Batman and Dick Grayson are peers. I don't think either one is second fiddle to either. And that's why I think it perfectly, like, it's perfect that it's a Brave and the Bold and it's Batman and Robin. You know, it's I mean, sure, Batman's named first, but I think that they're just kind of like
deal
equals.
On the cover, the X Boy Wonder, you know, like X is in big letters or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like and you know, like a big deal. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and they bust out, like, you know, like even on the cover, the Batmobile and all. And what's great about it, especially with Hugo Strange as a villain, and sort of that original Golden Age version of him, versus like the 70s version, which was the Marshall Rogers Englehart version, which is my other favorite. If you ask me the second favorite, it's the whole Englehart Rogers run.
Proactively called, or later called, Strange Apparitions. Yeah, that's one of my favorites too.
Yeah, you know what the problem is? I'm going on a complete tangent, and maybe the fans out there know this, is Marshall Rogers. So you talk about me being a Dick Grayson fanatic. Let me do a diversion for a minute. Is all the original comic art that I own is all Dick Grayson stuff.
Oh.
So I have a George Perez Nightwing. I have a Nick Cardy Robin. And those were sketches they did for me. I own a page of Batman 600 where Dick's Nightwing's hand is through the trophy case, and the original Robin costume is hanging off of it after he fights Batman. That took a lot to get. Like, I had to force the inker to sell that to me because he wasn't going to sell it. I paid a lot of money for it. I even have a couple of commissions. One was a Marshall Rogers Robin before he died. Because when I got into collecting art, which was thanks to my original boss, Michael Uslan, who I'm sure you guys all know, Michael got me into buying original art because he was such a collector. He has an insane collection. And, you know, I was looking for the stuff I grew up with in childhood, and the George Perez stuff was too expensive, so it was easier to get a commission. And none of the Marshall Rogers stuff ever made it to the market, to the original art market, other than maybe a few covers, like a Mr. Miracle cover. But none of that Strange Apparition stuff, as far as I knew at the time, had ever been released into the marketplace. So I found his art dealer and got him to draw a Robin commission, and he died like 6 months later. And then I have Alex Ross's original concept art for Red Robin and Kingdom Come.
Wow.
Which is actually not even the version they show in the making of stuff. It's the previous version. So he's got an R in the middle. It's that costume, but it's an earlier version of it. It's a little more Robin inspired. So I have that hanging up in my house. But one of my favorite pieces is I got Joe Staton to draw me an Earth 2 Robin. And it's a really cool piece. It's a real. If you remind me, I'll email you a picture of it. It's really cool. Or it might be on my Instagram.
Great.
Actually, all these pieces are on my Instagram. I have
okay.
I have like 2 giant Jim Lee pieces that he drew me, and then a couple of different sketches he drew me, all like 70s inspired. One is All-Star Robin, because they were originally going to use it. Him and Frank were going to originally use it as a cover, but then they never finished the book. So he gave me one of those. And then for my 40th birthday, which is now a while ago, Jim drew me a 70s inspired Robin.
Wow.
In the classic costume. And I have a running gag with Jim that about Earth 2 Robin, and he claims he never drew Earth 2 Robin, but what he didn't remember was he actually drew Earth 2 Robin on the Infinite Crisis cover for Jeff Johns. Like the 2nd or 3rd issue, Earth 2 Robin's in the background of one of the shots. Wow. So anyway, the reason I bring this up is the two things I wanted were, I wanted something of Marshall Rogers from that Strange Apparition run, which, by the way, also did a good job of showing Dick Grayson, in his cameo in that run, as a grown-up, like as a young adult, really cool. And that was, again, this is all just before the, Dick sort of goes into the Titans land and becomes Nightwing and all that stuff. This is years before. But the other thing I wanted was Jim Aparo. I wanted to buy pieces from this issue. And thanks to Uslan, Uslan's connected to every art dealer on the planet. I'm not joking, because like he owns everything from Ditko, Spider-Man, Bob Kane, Batman, Neil Adams, Hawkman, Gil Kane, Hawkman, all this crazy stuff. He's the greatest comic art collection I've ever seen. And so Michael was always helping me like introduce it, like this is what I want. And Aparo had just died when I started, so this is like 20 years ago. And I was told there was a very, very famous artist who died just before. I'm not going to name who it is. Before Aparo, and the family, not sort of understanding the art business, flooded the marketplace with all the original art from this guy. And what it did was it drove the value down. Nothing was valuable anymore because it was a flooded market of this guy's stuff. And the Aparo family sort of learned that and sort of have only over the last couple of decades parceled the original art out there. So there's not much original Aparo, like classic Aparo art out there. But when they do put it out, it goes for a lot of money. There's infinitely more popular Jim Aparo pieces. Like Batman, the Brave and the Bold 200 cover went for a lot of money, right? Those are the things they're sort of parceling. So this, even though I went to his dealer and I was like, can you please ask them? Like, I will pay good money for this. They were like, no, they're not going to. But again, this is years ago, and I haven't, really pursued it since. But every now and then I check and nothing comes up. Nothing comes up. So that's my dream, is to get at least some piece of artwork of Earth 2 Robin from this book. Knowing me, I'd buy like 4 or 5 pages if they were reasonable. But it's just, it had such an effect on me. And a lot of it's Aparo. Like the emotion in the book is so good.
Did you read this as soon as it came out? Did you pick this up off the spinner rack?
Comics. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, gotcha. At that, the advantage of growing up in New York in that era was the dawn of the comic shop. So we had comic shops.
Oh, nice.
That were relatively new. That were, the new direct market. Because remember, like in that sort of 80s run, you start to get like the direct market Teen Titans and Legion books that are only exclusive to the direct market and things like, so at that point it was very easy every week to go to the comic shop and buy that. I might have bought it off a spinner rack. I mean, it was still then too, but my memory is going to a comic shop and specifically buying these things.
So I thought that I was going to have to, so when DC does, I think it's been a while. No, last year they did a Matt Wagner and Steve Englehart, but a Tales of the Batman and then like a Legends of the Dark Knight collections of writers and artists. And
I gotta see if we have that here in the office, because I might have that here and I had no idea it was in it. When did that come out?
This was, I think, 2016. 2016, because he has an open introduction that he wrote, a pretty nice one too, and dated it 2016 as well. And it's like 9 stories, because Alan Brenner didn't do a whole lot of Batman comic book writing, but I thought this was, I didn't know that I was going to be able to go and grab this out of my my storage right now. So and we had some time before we were going to record. So I visited my comic shop, and lo and behold, in the back, in the, the back bins, they had a lot of Brave and the Bold issues. And sure enough, they had 182. And if I can get my hands on a physical original, give me. Like I want
it's in good
that.
condition too. Your copy's in good condition.
Yeah, it's in pretty like damn good condition. I mean, the coloring on
I'm
the
not,
inside's just a little
I'm
faded,
not a
but
guy. I have a great comic collection since
Mhm.
I'm a little kid of that era in particular. But I was never a board bag guy. Like to me, I was like, I'm never going to sell comics. So who gives a shit? I'm just going to read them till they
Mhm.
break. And that was one of those that broke. So I'd have to buy like a couple of copies of it.
Keep going back and get some.
Yeah, like like I said, I wasn't, like maybe I'm just a little too old, or I was too young at the time to appreciate the collector's market. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like it was just like
I was that way too as a kid.
I was like, I don't care if there's a little crease at the bottom. Just give me the book.
Yeah. I just want to see pictures of Batman, and so it's fun to.
But that's in really good condition.
You get the little bit of faded colors, but I mean the Alan Brenner recolored version. Of course, it looks good, but there's something about the original faded as opposed to like a brightly colored, like recolored too. I mean, that all looks good, but I'm glad I have both versions. So I'm glad I had the time that I was able to.
Is it printed on the glossier paper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a glossy paper fan either. Give me the original, like the original stuff. But you answered a lot of questions that I was going to ask you. So appreciate it. We saved some time there, but the story itself is really surprising to me in the sense of I feel like there's a lot in it, and it's 19 pages, a 19-page comic, and there's a lot. And I'm still a student of the multi-Earths characters, so I'm pretty, what do you want to say, post-crisis, following the year one. I'm a child of the 80s, and so then year one and death of the family and all that stuff I caught up on, but pretty decent from 90s on. Then in the 70s, Strange Apparitions, that collection, I love that run. And then the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams stuff. But I mean, outside of the standard Batman detective comics, my knowledge is, I'm still learning. So when it comes to a story like this, which is really cool, of multi-Earths, and I reread the issue 2 or 3 times to catch all that, because it was like, wait, what's happening here? Who's part of the Earth one? Oh, and then who's part of Golden Age is part of Earth 2 now, and then catching up with that. And it's fun for me for that, because I mean, it's just learning Batman history.
It appears, I can see how it appears foreign to you,
Mm-hmm.
but growing up in that era, there was, like I said earlier, there was the yearly events
Mm-hmm.
of JLA, JSA. Like you expected it, like it was part of, and JSA had, at that point, again, my chronology could be off, were in Adventure Comics, so they were very present in a way they're not now. You know what I mean? So like even in this issue, when Starman shows up with the cosmic rod and all that stuff, you sort of know, like yeah, that guy was in the last JLA crossover. Like who that is, and why he's doing it and all that stuff. Like it was unusual for it to happen in Brave and the Bold, but they had done stuff like there's one in that particular era of Batman Black Hawk, which I think was a period piece, or might have been an Earth 2 story. Like that Brave and the Bold was a place where you could do all this unusual stuff. That story, this story in particular, only works because Brave and the Bold exists. It wouldn't make sense in the regular Batman or detective, comic runs, etc. Like it wouldn't make sense. It's literally called Interlude on Earth 2, and that's what it is. It's an interlude. It's this fun little nugget of a story that only lunatics like me love. You know what I mean? Like, and remember, and again, this is happening at a time where that's a very memorable run of comics.
Well, the cover, and I said that there's a lot of there's a lot contained in these 19 pages, but I mean, the cover promises you Batman, Earth 2 Robin, Batwoman, the 1950s-ish Batmobile, and Hugo Strange, which to me, at my knowledge, I'm trying to rewind. I'm like, wait, at this era, this is post Hugo Strange was beaten to death by Rupert Thorne's thugs.
Right.
So how is he? This is gonna be an interesting story, because I did read this when this Alan Brenner collection came out, but I think I only read it once, and so it just slipped my mind on anything that happened, and I was kind of unaware. But I was really not like, I don't want to say like blown away and like over exaggerate, but I had a lot of fun in like for the story and how things are fitting in. And the as I've read in like recently on this show is Matthew Manning, the Batman the Ultimate Guide, and it's talking about past bat caves and entrances into the bat caves, and going through the barn, and that's referenced in here. The the bat gyro. I love that the bat gyros are in the Batmobile trunk. Like, that was so much fun to me. I'm a 35-year-old man now, but reading this, I don't know. I like dark, serious like Batman, and this isn't too serious, but it's not making fun by any chance either. And it ends up being a really fun comic book that way, of having all these fun references to go on, and this story of figuring out how is Batman on this earth and that Batman's dead, and then look at this Dick Grayson now all grown up. How does he play on that level with Batman of, I've already faced the fact that this Batman has died before, and here he is now, and Batwoman facing that too. And it's just emotional level, story level, then the kind of the Easter eggs and references level, like all of it just really worked for me.
No, it's absolutely, you've nailed it right on the head. You've nailed it.
Okay.
It's that's why it's a classic for me. It's clear that Brenner read, Golden Age stuff and knew his Earth 2, like knew the setup. And it doesn't really ever explain how Earth 1 Batman ends up there. It's like an electrical storm. Boom, he's suddenly there, and all that stuff. He sees his grave and all that shit, and it's great. Like, he didn't really have to explain it all and just get right into the character stuff.
It's not exposition heavy of making sure that we have panel after panel of explaining this is because of this or whatever. I can jump right in, even with my little familiarity between the two. And I could jump in and not be totally lost. But I want to ask you, when Strange gives his, this is earlier on, Hugo Strange's death and getting pushed off the cliff. I haven't read the Golden Age Hugo Strange stories in quite a while. Did that happen in one of those, or is that just kind of specific to this issue? Because it has the monster men, and then and I mean, when Dick's telling Bruce of, finally, Batman and I thwarted his plan in the process, accidentally sending the professor to what we thought to be a watery death. And I mean, the image is over a cliff, and Strange is falling. And I just couldn't remember. I'm like, I can see in my mind now the original like Monsterman story with Hugo Strange, but about how that ended, I was like, wait, is that how that really happened in there, or what? But I liked what are you gonna say, like a twist with this Hugo Strange. Right. How he looked in the Batcave, his story of what happened to him. I mean, that worked for me. And then I don't know, I don't want to say messed up, but creative, original, in the sense that he was just trying to get his enemies to kill him, to put him out of his misery. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, that's a story.
I mean, it's the thing is this. It does something that a lot of comics today don't do, which is, hey, we can do all this in the single issue, right? Like we can do all this beginning, middle, and end, single issue, 20 pages, whatever it is, and it's over. And they don't overstay the welcome, they don't drag it out, etc. There's no fat on the story, it makes me appreciate the economy of how to write for a single issue comic book, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's a lost art now. Everybody writes for trade paperbacks. Everybody writes to be 6 issues, and that's the market. Like, it's not a judgment. by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a reminder of these single issue things. And, and in those days, this doesn't apply to this story in particular, but you talk about the strange apparition stuff and even what Wolfman and Perez had done in Teen Titans, long-term planning. There was long-term planning in those days, and you could also still do single issues like this, because in those days they didn't know they were going to be collected someday, 25, 30 years later. It wasn't thought of then. So they had to be economical and get somebody to spend whatever the cover price was, 60 cents or 40 cents or whatever it was. This was 60 cents, which at
60
the time
cents
was
for this one.
ludicrous.
Outrageous. I can't pay
Insane.
60 cents for a comic book. So I having people on here and talking, it definitely is. If you have an arc, multi-issue story, you say, oh, I wish for more one-offs. If there were one-offs, you'd wish, oh, I wish that there were longer arcs. But we definitely say, you hear it repeated here a lot, that we do miss the one-off issues. Just self-contained stories. The most recent, it was only 8 issues. The most recent Legends of the Dark Knight title, it opened with a 3-issue arc, but then the remaining 5 were just one-offs, and that was great. I just really liked something about that. Like you'd said too, it makes it easier in rereading stuff for this show too, of, oh, it's one single issue, then great, I might read it 2 or 3 times. I do miss that. I love the longer stories, but like you'd said though, is Brenner, he just, I don't know, maybe his writing in other mediums came into play here, of really sharpening his script. And he says in that opening introduction that he loves like the parallel universe idea and aspects and multi-earth angles and stuff, and he tried to bring that into other writings. And so I don't know, it's just, I think that it's very sharp from a writer that the comic, or the average comic book reader, they know Jim Lee, they know Frank Miller, they know Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale, stuff like that. But I don't think that Alan Brenner wouldn't necessarily spark an instant, recognizability with. And it's kind of in his little book, the book here, compared to others, it's like a third of the size. It's very thin, and it's containing all of his work. But you get pieces like this in it, and it's a little golden gem.
Let me see the cover.
That's the
but that's Earth 2 also. Like, I forget he did that too. That was Earth 2 stuff. Batman and Catwoman.
And I think that is the autobiography of Bruce Wayne. And Aparo did that one too. And I remember that one being a pretty fun story as well.
Yeah.
Just because it's a Scarecrow. I'm a sucker for Scarecrow. And that's a pretty good story. But another one of everything's contained in one issue.
Yeah.
It's just,
well, that was the beauty of Brave and the Bold. Brave and the Bold very rarely, unless my memory's garbage, very rarely had multi-issue arcs. So you were getting something different every month, and it always delivered. And if you didn't like that one, there was always going to be one the next month. You know what I mean? Like, and you could do stuff, again, canon wasn't as important as it is now. Well, now it's a mess, but in those days it was very much, they did pay attention to what was there, but it didn't matter, like, because they were always adding something new to it, right? Like using the past to create something new. Now everybody uses the past to recreate the past. That's the big problem with comics today. Is we don't have a Dark Knight. We don't have an Aparo who's going to do a consistent 20-year run on something.
Yeah.
Things like that. But again, I think the reason this stays with me is because it was never duplicated. The Earth 2, they never did another team up. Aparo never drew that character again, the Earth 2 Robin. And there was no other team up of Batman and Earth 2 Robin anywhere ever again, as far as I know. Or interaction, unless it was in the Justice League or something where they said hi to each other. But there was never, a spotlight story like that. There was later, I don't know if Levitz wrote these, but there were Huntress backup stories in Wonder Woman at a certain point in the 80s, later on, that Staten drew. So Robin would pop up in that and all that stuff. But there was never, but he was there to support Huntress. It was, it's Huntress's book. So yeah, they never sort of, now you see different future versions of Dick Grayson, like in White Knight and Batman Beyond comics. He's always like a commissioner or some authoritative figure and all that stuff, which, and I think there's something fascinating about a world where Dick Grayson doesn't become Nightwing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like there's something fascinating where his trajectory is very different than the Earth 1 Robin's trajectory. There's no Teen Titans on Earth 2. He was sort of thrusted at a young age right into the Justice League, in that terrible Batman-inspired costume that I hate. At this point, there's even like an Earth 2 Robin Facebook group that I belong to. Everybody posts the original art and stuff like that. I posted my Staten piece on there, and everybody loved it.
Do you like this suit more than? Would this be your favorite Robin suit?
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, without a doubt. Nice.
Yeah, and there's a cool thing. I have it here at the office somewhere. I think it's Nightwing Earth 1, not Earth 1, Year 1 book, which God, who wrote that? What's his
Scott
face?
Beatty and
Chuck
Graham.
I think Chuck Dixon wrote it, probably with Beatty. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it opens on a story of, maybe it's Year 1. I'm pretty sure it's Year 1. It opens with the story of Batman and Robin chasing Clayface in the middle of winter. And Robin's in this like snow outfit. It's not, like a warm outfit or whatever. And they stop Clayface, but Batman and Robin don't get along. And it's but they go to the cave, and Dick's about to graduate into that costume for the first time. So like he pulls out, or Alfred pulls out the costume, all this stuff. And I was like, oh, cool. This is a great way to introduce the costume. And subsequently Batman fires him and drops the costume and he becomes Nightwing. So I always like these little appearances of the costume throughout the history of stuff, but no one has ever gone and done a story of that version of the character. Like they've made toys out of that character, that version of the character. DC directed one years ago, really nice figure, very Jerry Ordway inspired,
Nice.
Ordway Perez inspired from Crisis on Infinite Earths. And then Mattel did a little one, which was influenced from his first appearance in Justice League. It's not a very well-made figure, but it's still cool. So there's always these fun custom figures, like someone will do a custom Mego version or something like that. And Neil Adams sort of used that inspiration of that costume and did a sort of advanced version, which became Tim Drake's first costume. Was sort of a spin-off of that, like sort of an evolved version, because Neil Adams created those costumes.
I could see that influence for sure when I did see his costume of, you just change the colors, change the mask, and I definitely see Tim Drake's Robin.
Yeah,
I see that reveal of Tim Drake in that suit for the first time. At this time, Kathy Kane Batwoman, how often was she making appearances in comics?
She wasn't
aware of that.
She was
time.
dead.
Okay.
She was technically dead at least in Earth 1, right? And she had her Batgirl, the original Batgirl, who was blonde and all that stuff, who was a crush on Dick in the 50s and stuff like that. But then subsequently, my memory of her in the comics, I don't think she had been around for a bit. So I think it was very clever of the writer to sort of introduce her into it, because she probably hadn't been utilized at that point. The Earth 2 version, I guess didn't die, or they twisted something. I have no clue, but I always found Batwoman to be really interesting and underutilized character. And it's one of the few they haven't really brought back. They always find a new way to put a new spin on something. They've done it with Huntress, or like even Tom King in his Black Label Batman Catwoman book has a version of Helena Wayne in this sort of Batman inspired costume. and sort of going back to the concept of Batman, Catwoman having a daughter. They never really went back to Kathy Kane, and I think probably she's a problematic character in that what she really was just a female Bruce Wayne. She was a socialite. She had a sidekick. It was like the same thing. It's like almost like where there are two Robins. Like, what do you do with that character at a certain point? Whereas Barbara Gordon Batgirl is infinitely more interesting a character.
Yeah.
You know, I think Kathy Kane's a great character. I just, you know, I feel like a lot of that sort of spun into the current Batwoman, which is Katie Kane. Is it Katie Kane or something?
Kate Kane.
Kate Kane. You know, like it's sort of, that's the modern interpretation of that character.
Yeah.
So where does Kathy Kane fit into, you know, that original Batwoman? Where does she sort of fit into it?
Grant Morrison did, and then maybe this is because, like you said, she just isn't brought up or brought into many stories. But in Batman Incorporated, there might have been like an issue 4 or 5. There was one throwback.
That's right.
And I remember that stood out, one because, you know, it said Batwoman, and to me at that point, you know, the Kane version is the Batwoman that I was familiar with, and I was like, wait, what is this? And then I think the art was done. I always forget the term, but the way that they used to print art and like dots, they used a really cool throwback look for that also. And I think it was a throwback. They were like at a circus or something for that Batman Incorporated issue, but that one stood out of it, was cool. But then outside of that, I don't really know that version of the character. I'm pretty openly admit that I'm kind of clueless on that. So her being on the cover of this and reading the story, I'm like, oh, look at that. It's that version of Batwoman.
Yeah, I distinctly remember now. I'm sort of Googling this while we're talking.
Okay.
Is, you know, she had sort of, that version of Kathy Kane had sort of launched. Now I totally remember this. Launched in the 50s. So, you know, in my comic reading life, which is, you know, mid to late 70s, or the start of it at a really young age, she was around, right?
Okay.
She had sort of existed. And then they killed her off in the late 70s, I think, like in 1979, in Detective Comics, which at the time was one of these dollar books, you know, which was a Batman family centric, like 68-page things. And she died in that. I remember that. You know, and that was very unusual for the time. I'm looking this up. You know, how they did it, I don't remember. But I remember that book. Like I know I had it. But yeah, so to bring her back for this is really unusual in a good way. Like it was like, oh yeah, I found, by the way, that Grant Morrison thing. That also you have to understand, at a time where the continuity of the multiple Earths and the histories of who did what were starting to get convoluted, which eventually leads, you know, 6-7 years later after this to, well, in the case of this issue, you know, 5 or 6 years later, Crisis on Infinite Earths, you know, to sort of clean all this up. So that's how they wipe out Earth 2 Robin and Huntress, like they never existed. All this stuff, and it was real. I hated that, you know. But I mean, I loved Crisis on Infinite Earth, but I hated that. Like, oh, you got rid of all these characters that I liked, the Justice Society and all that stuff. But it was cleaner, like the idea that they had existed beforehand and all that shit. But yeah, so I think, you know, bringing back Kathy Kane, who at that point had probably been dead like 3 or 4 years in the continuity, was probably a surprise thing to a lot of readers. It probably was to me at the time too, especially seeing her on the cover.
Do you, maybe even now, if you remember when you read it, before the ending of this issue, Starman and Dick are talking, and Starman asks, you know, what the devil brought Batman to an empty cemetery on his Earth? And they didn't really answer that. Do you remember, or even now, how you interpret that, of why, or what was your take from that? Because they left it on an open-ended, unless I totally missed something, left it pretty open-ended.
Well, they're saying, the thing is, I think what's implied is it's no coincidence that Earth 1 Batman is brought back and lands in Earth 2 at the tomb of Bruce Wayne.
Okay.
At the graveside of Bruce Wayne. So I think the implication from Starman at the end of that, at the end of the issue, is that there's some divine intervention from Earth 2, the ghosts of Earth 2 Batman. Like there's some divine intervention that he's helping Dick and Kathy and whoever the hell get closure on that. Because what's sort of unusual about the issue is Huntress doesn't show up, et cetera. Like, which I think there's a Brave and the Bold issue of Batman and Huntress, but I don't remember it. But there's a whole another can of worms, in my opinion, that you could do that, where what happens when she sees her father, when they did like New 52 and stuff like that, they sort of changed it where Helena was Robin to Bruce in his later end of the career, and she becomes a version of whatever, instead of the Huntress. But yeah, like I remember reading it and again, that's what I think is the strength of the writing, is you're not really sitting there going, well, that doesn't make sense. How the hell did he get there too? It's like, in those days, it was just like, these things happen, and it's cool. And don't worry about it. Just enjoy the story.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy. I want to ask you a couple of things now as we start to get close to wrapping up here. Maybe in reading this, and it's getting specific. Do you have a favorite part? I ask everybody this. Do you have a favorite part, or rather, what is like the favorite part of this issue for you?
That's a good question. I do like the Whirly Bat stuff.
Yes.
Because I just thought that was a clever nod to the 50s. I like the Batwoman stuff, but I mean, I just like, the bits where like there's a bit, I'm trying to find it, where Robin rescues Batman. That's early on in the book. Like I thought, like he's really establishing himself as a man. Like he misses like a rung when he's falling off a building, and and he apologizes to Robin, and he sort of says, and Robin says like, let's work together, stuff like that. That's what I really enjoy.
That's
by the way, the Huntress issue is like 2 issues later.
Oh, okay.
And I don't remember it at all. Only because on my Google search for this issue, that issue comes up. And it's literally 2 issues later.
Back to the comic shop.
Exactly. I know I have these things. I gotta go to my dad's house and dig that one up. I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered the question.
You did.
properly.
Yeah, you did. I'd say probably for mine, I don't know. I like that part where he saves him, just because of how it's definitely showing, not that Dick was ever not seen as an equal, but this is even more so of an equal. But I also love the Whirly Bat part. That was fun. It was a fun nod that they find that this isn't that the Batmobile appears to be the original, because Dick signed it when they retired it, basically. So I mean, that whole page, and then the 3 panels of going internal dialogue of each of them, and talking about, like, I like that perspective. I think I like all that. And even more specific now, what do you have a favorite panel? Which in a Jim Aparo book is really hard.
Well, that's tricky. I don't have the book in front of me, but
covers count too.
I like the cover. I don't love the cover. There's only because it doesn't feature Robin enough. But the bit of him throwing the Batarang to slice the tires of the old Batmobile, and sort of his response when it explodes, is really cool. And sort of that, what I mentioned before, when he rescues him flying in the air, like there's just something very cool about that what I was talking about earlier, where it's like he's really drawn to be an adult versus what we've seen him for in the past and stuff like that. There's lots of good stuff in this. Like I said, I would kill to have any page from this book. Some of the action stuff's really good. It's a lot of fun.
I'm a sucker.
There's also the bit, by the way, where Batwoman explains why she retired, and she's got her hand on Dick's face and all that stuff. Like, is really poignant. It's a very poignant scene.
I'm always a sucker for a good Batcave image, but Jim Aparo Batcave image, give me all day, every day. And yeah,
Exactly.
when they first end up in the Batcave, and you got the T-Rex and the Penny and the old bat plane, that would probably be my favorite. But again, I mean, the things that you mentioned, Jim Aparo, he's every panel frameable. Since you are heavily involved, if you're a master in animation, would you ever like to see this story, this issue adapted in animation?
Sure.
Somehow.
They in the Brave and the Bold TV series, they had this version of Robin, or the costume. I just recently rewatched it. It was a lot of fun. But in this continuity, he's just the grown-up Robin. Like they don't explain anything, and he's sort of there's stuff inspired from it's clearly inspired from it. But man, what I would love to do an animation in the Aparo style of anything Batman. I think would be super cool. I think there's a world where, I love the new Batman movie. Like I think it's fantastic. But I think there's a world for a yellow oval, blue caped, fun Batman. And I don't know if you're reading Mark Waid's World's Finest.
Yes,
that's just come out. Like the first. I just read the third issue. Someone sent me the advance of the third issue. It's really good. Like there's a sense of fun to it. I think there's a world for that. Like when you talk about this story, where you were saying earlier, it's like it's a dark story, but it's not dark. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's got weight to it and it's got drama to it, but it's not a dark, oppressive story. And in that regard, it works really, really well. But yeah, I think there's a world for a fun, not campy, but fun Batman. Stories like this, which I think are really fun one shot.
Shame on me that I have not seen every episode of Brave and the Bold.
No, I haven't.
I would like to track it down and just make that the series of make my way through that from beginning to end, because I've seen a lot of them, but I haven't seen all of them, and I get a little, take away my bat card if, but I haven't watched every episode. Unbelievable. FJ, is there anything about this issue that's left that you haven't said that you'd like to say? Anything we didn't cover? Or anything?
No, I think we got the whole the whole gamut. I mean, the interesting thing is we talked for an hour and it's a single issue book. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, and again, it's just, look, we all have those moments in our lives where we find something in our childhood that just sort of stays with you forever. And I've learned this, with my nephew who's now 23, who looks at Star Wars from the prequel era because that was his introduction to Star Wars. And he holds that in a different regard than even the originals or the sequels, etc. There are just certain things that, could be just unusual like that don't have to be as popular as Dark Knight or, Year One or Hush or, any of these classic Long Halloween, like any of these classic stories. Like you can love all that, but there's always like these one things that something clicks in your brain as a kid and that stays with you. And that's what this story did. It just stayed with me forever.
I said that I read it probably for the first time in 2016 and didn't remember it, not because it isn't good. I just don't know why I didn't remember it. But now this is definitely stick in my mind more now because, this is just, I don't know. It's a lot of fun. It's a really fun, contained Batman story that, take 20 minutes and just dive in. If you can track it down, like I said, there's a back issue at my comic shop and it was $5. Like, sure, absolutely. It wasn't unreasonable by any means. So I can only imagine you should be able to track it down. Last thing, I want to ask your opinion on this. So in every episode, I try to follow up with a poll question on the Batman Book Club's Twitter at thebatmanbc. And the last poll question I'd asked, because we covered the many deaths of the Batman, written by John Byrne, illustrated by Jim Aparo. That was the first time ever got to cover Aparo on this show. 103 episodes in and finally got to it. Now look at this, back to back Jim Aparo. I'd asked, when it comes to John Byrne, who did he write better for, Superman or Batman? A lot of people, and I said I said a lot of people. I was like, now take some time to your answer because I'm not talking longevity. I'm talking like impact and who did you think he wrote better for? And 74% people, 74% of the people said Superman. And I mean, I figured as much.
You know what's great though is the Byrne Captain America Batman crossover thing where they're like in real time.
I haven't read that one.
Read those?
No.
You need to read those because it's sort of the last great John Byrne thing. You know, Byrne isn't as prevalent in the modern eye in comics because he's nuts and sort of pissed off everybody, supposedly, you know, as opposed to the Perez's or the Neil Adams of the world,
sure.
who, you know, or the Aparos of the world who sort of have longevity. Byrne's contribution to that era is truly significant. But his impact on Superman in terms of his reinvention of it or his modernization of it is a better word. Versus Batman, where he just told good Batman stories. But but I strongly urge you to read the Batman Captain America crossover, which is sort of an Elseworlds thing that he did in the 90s. And they did a lot of them. Like I'm sure there's some omnibus or some collected version of
collections that if you're ready to spend a good chunk of money, then you can read them.
Because they haven't
which
been
is too
reprinted. It's like the JLA Avengers thing. But those are fun. Those are really fun. The later ones are not as exciting, but the initial ones are really cool. And it's like telling the Batman Captain America story as if they both debuted, you know, in the 40s.
Oh, cool.
And sort of their stories over into the modern age. And like sort of chronologically, meaning there's no reboot. There's like, you know, if Batman is this age in the 40s, he's an old man by the time we get to the 80s, you know, like stuff like that. There's that kind of fun stuff, but in terms of impact, Byrne's impact, Man of Steel, you gotta Byrne, people forget what Byrne did for Marvel in Avengers, Fantastic Four in particular. And then his DC stuff like Legends, which is sort of the post Crisis on Infinite Earth sort of launch pad. Man of Steel comes out of that. It can't be written off. It's significant. And the problem is he didn't do enough after that to sort of be recognized in the modern eye beyond his X-Men stuff, in particular, Death of Jean Grey and all that stuff, which is, you know, genuinely classic. Emin Claremont, genuinely classic storytelling. There you go.
So for this episode's poll question, maybe a little simpler question, maybe a simpler answer, maybe not. Yellow oval or no yellow oval?
I can go either way. I sort of want to see the yellow oval come back.
On the
just for I think in the current Batman run that they're doing now, the Josh Williamson stuff, he's got the Batman Inc. outfit and all that stuff. I just don't think Batman should be limited to one costume. I think he should have different costumes depending on the situation. So I'm surprised they don't do. I should tell Jim Lee that. You know that they should have fun with it, meaning different costumes for different occasions. If the mission calls for this, it should be, you know, the yellow oval or whatever. But I can go either way. Just depends on who's drawing it and what the story is.
I think a lot of people
just make it good.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, I think that there always was, you know, a yellow oval. And I mean, as you even see in this issue itself, of you get an old school Batman suited robot, no yellow oval, fighting a current one with a yellow oval. So it's a popular symbol. People love the yellow oval. People like it without it. So I don't know what I'd answer. I mean, go back and forth always.
I'll be curious to see how people respond to that.
Yeah, me too. FJ, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you
thank you
coming
so
on,
much.
us talking some Batman. Is there anything at all that you'd like to plug, inform the people where to go, all that?
I'm only on Instagram at FJ DeSanto. You know, there's, like you mentioned earlier, Transformers War for Cybertron trilogy, which we just finished up last year. That's on Netflix. And then I have a second show animated show for Netflix coming out later this year based on the video game Tekken.
Oh yes,
which the trailer's up now.
My first PlayStation game. That's my first PlayStation game was Tekken.
So you got to watch it. You got to watch it. So
Got it.
I'm not sure when that comes out, to be honest with you. Just at some point in probably third or fourth quarter this year. But and there's plenty more to come.
All right. Excellent. Well, as I said, you can vote in the latest poll on the Twitter of the Batman Book Club at thebatmanbc. You can also follow same handle on Instagram. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to support the show, there's a variety of ways you can do that. Like I said at the top of the show, you can get a Patreon. You can get merchandise at TeePublic. Just type TBBC at the tpublic.com, or the easiest way and the cheapest way, if you don't want to spend any money at all, that's to rate and review it wherever you listen to the show, whether it's Apple, Spotify, I don't know, Google Play, Amazon, all of that. The more reviews the show gets, the more it helps spread the word. And as we all know, the word is panic. So for FJ DeSanto, I am Ryan Lauer, and until next time, read my panic.